Imagine waking up tomorrow and every country on Earth has disappeared. No United States, no Canada, no Mexico, no France, no India, no China, no borders, no passports, no flags, just one enormous planet with no countries on it. But here's the question: how did humans ever create countries in the first place? Because for most of human history, countries didn't exist. There were no national borders, no immigration officers, no passports, no one asking, "What country are you from?" So how did we go from small groups of humans living around fires to a world divided into nearly 200 countries? In this video, you'll discover the surprising chain of inventions that made countries possible, how humans first became attached to land, how agriculture turned food into power, how writing helped governments control thousands of strangers, how the first borders appeared, and how millions of people eventually learned to believe we are one nation. And by the end, you'll understand something you probably never thought about before. A country isn't something you can touch. It's an idea that humans made powerful enough to control land, laws, money, armies, and billions of lives. So, who invented countries? The answer is far stranger than you might expect, because nobody did. Before countries, to understand how countries were created, we have to go back to a time when the entire idea of a country would have sounded impossible. Imagine living 30,000 years ago. You wake up beside a fire. Around you are a few dozen people, your family, your friends, people you've known your entire life. There is no government, no police department, no courthouse, no passport. And if someone asks where you belong, you don't give them a country. You point to your people, your family, your band, your ancestors. Your identity isn't attached to a flag. It's attached to relationships. And that system worked because the groups were small. You could actually know the people around you. You knew who was trustworthy, who was dangerous, who owed you something, who could help you, and who couldn't. But then, human populations began growing. People started staying in the same places for longer, and suddenly, a problem appeared. You can't personally know everyone. You can't settle every argument by reputation. You can't remember every promise, every debt, every family connection, every conflict. And once your community becomes too large, something has to replace personal relationships, something invisible, something powerful, something that can make strangers cooperate. Humanity was about to discover it. The moment land became ours. For most of human history, moving made sense. If animals moved, you followed. If food disappeared, you moved. If the weather changed, you moved. Land wasn't necessarily something you owned. It was something you used. But after the last ice age, something began changing in parts of the Near East. Some communities started staying in the same places for longer periods. They built more permanent structures. They stored food. They returned to the same locations. And they buried their dead there. That last part may sound small. It wasn't. Because the moment your ancestors are buried beneath the ground becomes more than dirt. It becomes memory. It becomes identity. It becomes home. Imagine someone entering your valley and saying, "This land is mine." You might answer, "No, our people have lived here for generations. Now there is something worth defending. Not just food, not just animals, but territory." And once humans began attaching identity to land, the idea of a border was only a matter of time. But land alone couldn't create a country. You still needed a way to unite people who didn't know each other. And humans found that too. The power of a shared story. About 11,500 years ago, in what is now southeastern Turkey, humans were building something extraordinary. Göbekli Tepe, huge stone pillars, some more than 5 meters tall, carved with lions, snakes, birds, and other animals. Think about what that means. These weren't skyscrapers. They weren't factories. They weren't military bases. They were monumental structures created by communities that lived thousands of years before the first cities and states of Mesopotamia. We still debate exactly how the site functioned, but one thing is clear: humans could organize large groups of people around shared rituals and traditions, even before the rise of full-scale states. And that revealed something incredibly important about our species. You don't need to personally know someone to cooperate with them. You just need to believe that you belong to the same group. That idea would eventually become enormous, because every country works the same way. You don't know millions of your fellow citizens. You'll never meet most of them. Yet somehow, you believe you're part of the same us. But shared belief doesn't feed people. And this is where something even more powerful enters the story: grain. the food that could be counted around the beginning of agriculture, humans began producing food in ways that could create large surpluses, and some crops were particularly useful for building centralized societies, especially cereals like wheat and barley. Why? Because grain has a strange property. You can count it, you can measure it, you can store it, and someone else can take it from you. Imagine a village producing more grain than it needs. Now imagine a leader saying, "You will give us part of your harvest." Why? Maybe for protection, maybe for the gods, maybe for the community, maybe because soldiers are standing nearby. Whatever the justification, a surplus creates something new. A government can collect it, store it, redistribute it, and use it to support specialists, builders, soldiers, officials, priests, administrators. Suddenly, food isn't just food, it's power. And once someone controls the food, they can begin controlling the people who depend on it. But there was one enormous problem. How do you keep track of thousands of people? You can't remember everything. So humans created something that would change civilization forever. Writing. The first paper trail. Go to ancient Mesopotamia, thousands of years ago. A city called Uruk is growing fast. Thousands of people, then tens of thousands. Imagine trying to run a city that large using nothing but memory. Impossible. Someone receives grain, someone else receives beer. A worker is owed a ration. A farmer owes part of a harvest. A temple owns animals. Someone moves livestock. Someone pays a debt. Someone doesn't. You need records. So people began pressing signs into wet clay. And some of the earliest writing we know about wasn't created to tell beautiful stories. It was created to keep track of things. Grain, animals, workers, rations, transactions. In other words, one of humanity's greatest inventions began as paperwork. And paperwork created something extraordinary. A government could now remember, even when individual humans couldn't. A ruler didn't have to personally know every farmer. A tablet could record what the farmer owed. A scribe could carry the information. An official could enforce it. And suddenly, power could travel farther than a person's voice. This was the beginning of bureaucracy. And bureaucracy was one of the invisible technologies behind the state. But now, there was another problem. If you control land, food, and people, what happens when your neighbor wants the same thing? When the line became a border, ancient Mesopotamia wasn't one peaceful kingdom. It was filled with competing cities, and sometimes two cities wanted the same piece of land. One of the famous examples involved Lagash and Umma. They fought over fertile territory, and eventually boundaries were marked, not just by memory, not just by tradition, but physically, recorded, defended, enforced. This is a crucial moment, because a border isn't really a line. A border is a promise backed by power. It says, everything on this side is governed by us, and everything beyond that point is not. But once you create a boundary, you need to enforce it. You need soldiers. Soldiers need food. Food needs storage. Storage needs administration. Administration needs records. And suddenly, the pieces fit together. A country wasn't one invention. It was a chain of inventions. Land, food, writing, law, power, and violence. But there was still one problem. How do you make people actually want to belong? From kingdoms to nations, for thousands of years, people didn't think of themselves as members of modern nations. They identified with a village, a city, a tribe, a religion, a dynasty, an empire. The modern idea of a nation came much later, and it required something more powerful than obedience: belonging. Imagine two strangers living hundreds of miles apart. They've never met. They have different lives, yet they believe you are part of the same nation. They may share the same flag, the same language, the same history, and the same identity. Philosopher Benedict Anderson called nations imagined communities, not because they're fake, but because no person can personally know millions of fellow citizens. They have to imagine that connection, and millions of others have to imagine it too. Once enough people believe in it, the idea becomes powerful. People obey laws, pay taxes, vote, defend borders, and sometimes die for their country. So who invented the country? Nobody. There was no single inventor. Countries emerged slowly. Small communities became settlements. Settlements became societies. Agriculture created surplus. Surplus created wealth. Competition created stronger governments. Writing helped organize them. States created borders. And much later, languages, schools, laws, media, flags, and shared history created national identities. And here's the strange part. The mountains don't know where a country ends. The rivers don't care about passports. The earth itself has no borders. Humans created the lines. Then, we built an entire civilization around them. Go back 15,000 years. Look across the valley. There is no border, no passport, no flag. flag, just land and people. Today, that same land may have a border, a checkpoint, a fence, or simply a line on a map. The soil itself doesn't tell us where one country ends. We do. We decide. We enforce. And most importantly, we believe. Perhaps that is the greatest invention of all. Not the border, not the army, not the government, but the ability of humans to look at millions of strangers and say, we are one people, and then make that belief powerful enough to change the world.